Hey guys, Keith here. Really raw video. Just wanted to show you a concept. It'll be in 26, but it really won't be there with any fanfare, and by default it won't do anything. Interested in your feedback. It's a bit technical at the moment. I'm probably going to throw some UI on top of it, try to simplify it a little bit. But I wanted to share a concept for a capability which hypothetically would allow people selling sequences or the community in general to build mappings between the sequence vendors models that they're using and the typical names that they use for their props and patterns for those names. Now, clearly when people install the models such as the ones I've got here, they will typically use the default name, maybe with a number after it, a dash and a number or something, but they'll generally use the default names, and they'll obviously generally use the default group names that come with those models, where they come with those models. I did have problems with the Rosa Wreath. The model that I downloaded using the download link had no groups at all in it. It had submodels but no groups, and so I've actually used one out of one of the vendors' layouts because it had a bunch of groups defined. I'm assuming that those groups are groups that other people are using, but I don't know, and it really isn't that important in this demonstration. So what I wanted to show was importing a number of sequences onto this very simple layout. I've got two Rosa wreaths and two PPD wreaths. They've got slightly different names. The groups have come in. The PPD ones are the default groups. The Rosa wreath ones, like I say, are the ones I got out of one of the vendors' layouts. Again, I don't know that they're the right names, but they are what they are, and it doesn't really matter with the concept. So quickly, let's create a sequence. Let's import a sequence. Now, I've got a bunch of sequences here from a variety of vendors who all sent me something today. Thank you for that. I'm just going to choose a couple of them, not going to do them all. But let's go drive lights. So he has a song here. The song again is not important. We're going to do an import. The import dialog's here. You can see he does have a PPD wreath in here. He uses some of the groups. The groups are not named the same. He's got extra strings on the end of it. I don't think he has a Rosa wreath. No, he doesn't have a Rosa wreath in this particular sequence. Oh, sorry, yes, he does. He has a Rosa wreath and he has a couple of the groups sequence, and this is actually where I stole the thing from, so the group names match. So if I click auto map here, you would expect some of these things to come in. You'd probably expect these two groups to come in. You would not expect the Rosa wreath to come in. The PPD groups you would not expect to come in, and the model itself hasn't been sequenced. So again, I wouldn't expect that to come in. But with my change, when I click auto map, the auto map takes a little bit longer. It's doing a lot of processing now. But you can see that it has actually managed to map probably pretty much everything that it needed to. It did match the groups, so even though the group names here didn't quite match, it did manage to map them. And the Rosa wreath, although I called my Rosa wreath here Rosa wreath -2, it did manage to map that one, and my other regular Rosa wreath, which always would have matched with the auto mappers, also matched. And the two models for the Rosa wreath, because the names match perfectly, of course, always would have matched. So not a bad import, if I say so myself. Let's cancel this and let's do a import again. This time we will go to a PPD sequence. Again, it's not really important what it is. Few more props sequenced in this one, so it takes a little bit longer to load. I'm running under debug, that's why it's green. It takes a while longer to load. So here, obviously, the PPD group names are now all well matched, and we'd expect them to match, but there is no Rosa wreath, etc. which of course would be a little bit frustrating to a person who had these two props. They're going to have a bit of work to do. But in this case, I've kind of made some decisions for them to guide them to say, well, if you've got someone who's sequenced a PPD wreath, here's how you might make it look reasonable on a GE wreath. Now, I'm not saying it does look reasonable. I'm saying, imagine I had. And so you click Auto Map. And what that does is it comes in and it maps, in this case, the PPD wreath. Obviously, all the PPD wreath groups all mapped nicely. They would have mapped either way. They don't sequence the model itself, only the groups, so they don't come in. But some of these rows of wreath ones have also come in and it's mapped the PPD wreath to it, because again, I've decided, or I've said as the vendor, I've said, look, if you're trying to import this sequence onto a layout that contains a rosa wreath, here are the groups that look reasonably good on these groups that come with the rosa wreath. Assuming these were the only groups in the rosa wreath, I'm not going into model gate, that's what it is. So that's that one, and I did try, I also tried the Sequence Solutions. So let's bring one of their sequences in as well. I am skipping Magical Light Shows. Does great sequencing, but doesn't use any high def props. And as I went in to look at it, I struggled with it. I'm also not going to do extreme sequences. Ron did send me his layout, but he didn't actually send me a sequence, and so I don't really have anything to import, so I'm going to skip over that for now. The concept remains the same though. So now we're bringing this in. Now Michael and Diana use a very different way of labeling all of their submodels and their groups, etc., which means of course none of these are going to match anything on my layout here because I've used all the defaults. But if we click on the auto map and wait a second or two, this will run faster in the production version. It always runs slower in debug. Come on. Oh, okay, there it is. And so what it's done here is it has actually done it. So the diamond arms have come in correctly, the PPD wreath valleys. Now there's not actually one of those here. I just mapped it to the spiral all. I said, well, maybe that's it. In this case, they do map to, or they do sequence the actual model itself. So those have come in, again, weird and wonderful names, but they've mapped quite nicely. You'll see that it's mapped regardless of the decorations that I've put onto the model name. So even though I've called this a PPD wreath V5 and this one a wreath V5-2, it's still mapped the same effects from the same model onto it. And it's done the same thing with the two rosa wreaths as well. They just appear in different places. So that's the concept. My thought is that vendors may choose to maintain and distribute to their customers what I'm calling an maphint file, which is an XML file. I'll show it to you in a minute. I'm hoping you won't have to edit the XML file. I'm hoping I will get it into a UI, etc. Because I also expect that users may choose to maintain these, or groups may collaborate together to build these files for potentially the share drive or sequences on there, or potentially if you choose not to build them, they may build them in order to help each other bring your sequences in for various models, etc. You clearly wouldn't do every model or every type. That would be a huge amount of work, and you'll see in a minute it gets a bit technical at times, so I doubt you'd do that. But for some of these marquee elements or the real fundamental elements that lots of people have in shows and struggle with, well, what do I do with the mini trees if I don't have mini trees, or what do I do with the candy canes if I don't have candy canes? And so setting up a default mapping that says, look, if you don't have mini trees but you have candy canes and you don't have candy canes in the sequences that you're selling, then stick the mini trees onto the candy canes, they'll look fine. That sort of thing can be set up. So enough of the blabbering, let's bring the file up. So this is the file. This is the file that did all of those mappings. I've broken it down by the vendor. It's a bit bigger for the Lawrence Drive lights because he has so many more models and groups, whereas the others didn't tend to. And like I said, I wasn't trying to do the whole world here. I was trying to prove the demonstration. Essentially, each one of these is a line. Each one's processed in the order that they're in the file. Order will matter, and obviously eventually when I build this properly, there would be a UI that would let users decide which mapping file they want to use, potentially allow them or you to decide what order you want things to appear in here, because it can matter, because once something's mapped, it won't be overridden. So you want to get the ones up front that you really want to succeed versus the ones which are maybe more specific later or less specific later, which you want to catch. The from model is typically the exact model name. There's no wildcards or anything here. This is the exact model name in a sequence that you sell. It can be a model name, a model group name. It really doesn't matter, but it would be literally the string that is inside the sequences. There's no point putting everything in here. It's only the things that you sequence. So if you only sequence groups, then you'd only put groups in here. You wouldn't bother with all the underlying models because there's never going to be any effects to map across in a sequence that you sell. The left-hand side is the pattern matching that decides where it lands. And this can be very simple. It can be just a literal string, but you can also use patterns, and these patterns are something that's known as a regular expression. You can look it up if you want to. It can get very cryptic, particularly if you're trying to do really complex things, but there's also a simple dialect or some simple things that you can use that aren't that hard to get your head around and work on it. So for instance, this dot star at the end just says, after you get to the end of the word wreath, it doesn't matter what appears after that. Whatever it is, just assume it matches. It's all good. Whereas the wreath has to match explicitly. This /s star just says the user can choose to put a space or a tab, or in practice it'll be a space, between rosa and wreath. But if it's not there, the star says the space has to appear 0 or more times. So if it's not there, it still matches. If there's 3 spaces there, it will also match the name to go to. And this stuff at the front, the stuff in brackets separated by the vertical bar, this just says it could be this or it could be this. The caret says that it's the beginning of the string, so it could be that this is just the word rosa wreath and some garbage on the end. That would match. Or it could be prefixed by GE space and then rosa wreath, and that would also match. And so if that rule holds true, then it will map this model, all the effects from this model, onto all of the props that happen to match this particular pattern. Now, obviously, if the user's already done a mapping, it won't do it. This is just going to fill in the gaps and let you try to do it. Now, you don't have to put things in here that literally match. The existing capability will take care of that. The existing capability is also able to do things like, ignore dashes and numbers and the like, etc. So, you don't need to put something in here for something that already auto maps. This is just the ability to add additional patterns and the like that you want users to be able to auto map into the models. I would suggest that we stick with the really common things, people that use the default model names or a very simple variant of them, or the common things like star, star 1, star 2, star 3, star 4, etc., or arch 1, arch 2, arch 3, arch 4, because people commonly do that. But you're not necessarily going to be able to deal with a person who calls it left arch 3 or something. Now, you could say, look, as long as it contains the word arch somewhere in it, then I'm just going to map effects onto that from my arches. That sort of thing will work. I haven't done, and maybe I should be able to say in here that, look, only match these things where this particular thing is a group or this particular thing is an actual model. That may help, and look, happy to take feedback on that. Maybe that would be a better way of getting a better match. Obviously, at the end of the day, I can choose to put this in and you can choose not to use it, and that's fine. It doesn't make any difference. You won't be disadvantaged in any way. None of the existing functionality will stop working. This just provides a potential avenue for value add for people that are purchasing your sequences but don't have the particular props that you have, and help you get those things to map more quickly and create that impression that your sequences are amongst the easier ones to map and bring into your layout. Obviously, it's not going to do anything for how they look. You're going to have to make those value calls, and maybe there aren't good models or groups, etc., for your particular effects. I don't know. That's not the problem I'm trying to solve. So I've rabbled on a little while. I realise I've probably repeated myself 6 times, but hey, what the hell? Maybe you got an extra ad and I got an extra cup of coffee out of it. Thanks, guys.